Good evening. This week's question time comes from Slough. And a big welcome to our audience here and, of course, to our panel, the Business Secretary, Vince Cable, the Shadow Attorney General, Emily Thornbury, the Conservative MP, Claire Perry, the Deputy Leader of the UK Independence Party, Paul Nuttall, and from the Huffington Post website, Mehdi Hassan. And good. Our first question comes from Eamon Barrett, please. Eamon Barrett.
With today's announcement on the GDP figures, are we seeing the first signs of green shoots?
Paul Nuttall.
Well, I think initially the figures look rather positive, and let's thank God that we're out of recession. I mean, manufacturing is up, unemployment is down, but there are some negatives in there. I mean, the construction industry seems to have bottomed out. Youth unemployment is still around 20%, which is totally unacceptable. And I do question whether these figures are actually real, because if you think of the quarter that these figures were taken, it was from July to September when we had the Olympic bounce. In fact, Olympic ticket sales amounted to, I think it was 0.2% of GDP, although they're counted in these figures. The ticket sales necessarily didn't take place at that point. So I do worry that the figures are false, and I do worry that we will regress afterwards. But the real issue with our economy at the moment is actually national debt. That's more important, because whilst you're sitting here and you're watching this programme, and for the people at home, in the hour that this programme takes place, our national debt would have grown by 18.5 million. That's 18.5 million every hour. It's about 450 million a day. So by 2014, we could have a national debt of 1.4 trillion. And what we're doing is we're putting a noose round the neck of our next generation. We're putting a noose round the neck of our children and our grandchildren, because they will have to pay off the debt that this generation has built up, and I think it's unfair, and the national debt is something that we have to get hold of. But as I'll go back to the question, I think it is positive, but I do worry that these are false figures.
Okay.
Well, I must say, I must pay tribute to Ian Duncan Smith. I mean, this is a guy who knows his brief. He spent 8 years researching this before he went into government. He refused to be moved and reshuffled as well. I mean, he understands his brief, and I don't agree with much that the coalition does, but I do believe that they're getting this right on welfare and benefits, because under Labour, welfare exploded. It rose by 60% between 1997 and 2010. It was unsustainable. It's cost each household in tax £3,000 a year. But what we must be careful of doing is we shouldn't stigmatise people on welfare. There's graduates coming out of university who can't get jobs. There are people who are being affected by the cuts who are coming out of work and can't get jobs. However, there is a growing underclass in this country. I'm from Bootle, which is one of the poorest constituencies in the country. We have the lowest life expectancy in England, and I see it every day. You've got one family who live there. Dad goes out to work, maybe on the docks, maybe in a factory. Mum goes out, stacks shelves in Asda, and they live within their means. They make that decision. Then you've got the family next door on benefits, who still have the flat screen television, still have a car, and can afford to go on holiday once a year. What it's doing, this system, is it's creating resentment within the working class community, and it's splitting the working class community. Well, I think you'd have to be mad to claim that there isn't a significant underclass. And there is. I worked with I'm telling you, there is a significant underclass in this country, and it's been born out of a benefits and a welfare system, which
it's born out of unemployment. There are 4 million people in this country looking for full-time work.
All right, one at a time. Mehdi, you've had your say. Let him reply to the attacks you made on him.
He didn't mean it to be set up like this, because what we've got now at the moment is we've got a benefit system which should be a safety net for the needy, but in some cases, and I hasten to say, some cases, what it's become is a career path and a vehicle for people who just don't want to work.
All right.
Can I come back?
No, in a moment you can.
Well, I think the one thing that's upset me really about this story over the past couple of weeks is that people are talking about it as if, oh, well, you know, that was the culture in the 1970s type of thing. But look, paedophilia isn't about culture. Paedophilia is a crime, it's a serious crime, and it needs to be knocked out. But in terms of the BBC, I agree with John Simpson. I think the BBC is facing the biggest crisis that it's faced in the past 50 years. And now what we've got is we've got people passing the buck, people trying to pass the blame onto people who are lower down the food chain, shall we say, in the BBC. I haven't lost confidence in the BBC. I've lost confidence in the BBC hierarchy. And I feel as if there's a bit of inevitability about this now. Like the Andrew Mitchell case, I think it's gone on too long. I think it's only going to get bigger, and I think in the end heads will roll, and I suspect it will end up with the Director General having to go. But look, the real point in this is that 300 people now have come forward and said that they have been victims. They're the people we should be focusing on, and we should wish the police well in their investigations, because there are perpetrators still out there who need to be brought to justice. Now, what do we do with Saville himself? Well, his gravestone has been removed. We've had street names which have been taken down. I would suggest the next move, how to deal with Jimmy Saville, would be let's strip him of his knighthood. It'll take a change in the law, let's do it, strip him of his knighthood, and also let's get the Catholic Church to do with his papal knighthood, do away with his papal knighthood to boot, because that man needs to be punished even in death. Can I just say, I mean, it's not just the BBC you've got to answer questions here. It's the CPS, it's the national press, actually, because the rumours were well known, and we know that the national press looked at it in 1992, a certain newspaper, and it was dropped for legal reasons. 5 police forces were investigating Saville, and I think the NHS has questions to answer for giving them the right to roam round Leeds.
They gave him a bedroom in Stoke
Mandeville. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So all of these organisations have got questions to answer. It's not just the BBC.
Okay.
Well, I agree with the Prime Minister on this. It makes me sick to my stomach, the idea that prisoners should have the vote. But what makes me more sick is the fact that our own sovereign Parliament, our own elected representatives, have voted to say no to votes to prisoners. And actually, we're being told we have to do it by a court which actually isn't even in this country, by judges who are faceless. It's absolutely wrong.
Yeah, Perry.
Oh, sorry. I'm going to just make another point on this. I mean, look, criminals have broken their contract with society. Society should break its contract with them. Now, here's the interesting point on this. At no point in the European Convention of Human Rights does it mention votes. In fact, it was the Attlee government that made sure that it wasn't mentioned. So we're in a situation now in this country where the only people who can't vote are peers, felons and lunatics. Now, I can see all sorts of legal wrangles coming, because where are we going to go? The logical conclusion is we give prisoners the votes, we give the lunatics the votes. Actually, some could say that the lunatics run the country, but there we are.
All right.
And here's a big point. What are we going to do, David? Are we going to defy the fines, or are we going to leave the ECHR? Because we can't. I tell you why. Because to be a member of the European Union, you have to be in the European Court of Human Rights. And it's things like votes for prisoners which actually make people more sceptical about Europe, and it's actually one of the reasons why more people want a referendum on our membership of the European Union.
Yes.
I'd just like to call Paul up on... did you call people who are sectioned under the Mental Health Act lunatics? That's quite offensive.
It does stipulate quite clearly that the people who can't vote in this country are peers, felons and lunatics.
All right.
Talk about that down the line. I mean, UKIP is the fastest growing political party in Britain, and we're polling now around 10 to 12%, quite regularly in opinion polls. We're expected to do well in the Corby by-election. In fact, I expect us, we're fielding more candidates in the Police Commission elections than the Liberal Democrats. That sort of tells us where we are at the moment, and we're projected to go on and win the 2014 European election. All right. European election. Let's see where we are in 2015, because it could be very interesting indeed.